Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
John Working, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Always happy to be in the center of the universe.
Me too. Center of the Universe is actually in the center of the universe, I believe.
That's what they say.
I think it's been proven, actually.
Okay.
It's been proven because you can stand in one place and hold your light bulb while the rest of the world rotates around you. Falls right out.
And
awesome.
You did not come up with that. Somebody else came up with that?
No, that was a joke that I've always heard about UVA grads. As the son of two proud Tar Heels, they stand in one place and the rest of the world will rotate around them.
That's so true.
So I don't know what to do with that. So you started Railside Law Group a few years ago. Tell us how you started.
We started in the fall, winter of 2015. My partner and I, her name is Virginia Podboy, and she and I were actually classmates briefly. When I was in my first year, she was in her last year of law school. And we ended up working in this thing called the Richmond Legal Incubator, which was kind of a setup where you could go learn how to be a solo practitioner without really being on your own. And we had our offices next door to each other there, worked for a couple years, and I had my eyes on Ashland for a number of reasons, and eventually talked her into going in to business with me. She actually lives in Midlothian, so it was perfect for her because she wanted to have some distance between her home and where she grocery shops in her practice. I actually live about 3 miles from my office, so it's the complete opposite, which is fine, because that's part of what I was looking for. My wife and I live out here. Our children go to the local schools. She has a business in town. I went to Randolph-Macon, so I've kind of been lurking in the center of the universe for about 24 years.
But you first came to Ashland for college.
I first came to Randolph-Macon in the fall of 1997 as a freshman, future English major, and football player. I was really wanting to play college football as my father did, and my grandfather did, and my brother did. And Randolph-Macon afforded me that opportunity, which was wonderful. We won the championship when I was a freshman, and made a lot of great friends that way.
Nice. And you stayed here, obviously.
I stayed here. Technically, I was gone for 1 year. I met my wife about a month after I graduated from college. And she was the maid of honor in my brother's wedding, and I was the best man. And so she was up 2 weeks early to try to help with all the plans, and we kind of had that lightning bolt romance. And about 6 weeks after we met, a job opening came in at the school where she was working. She said, "Hey, man, we've got an opening for an English teacher and a football coach. You should apply." I said, "Well, where is it?" She said, "Vero Beach, Florida. We'll live right on the beach, and we'll be young and have jobs. It'll be wonderful." I said, "Okay." And everybody said that I was ridiculous and we were too impulsive. But when we had a football game there, she surprised me to come back up for the Randolph-Macon homecoming. And that was her first time seeing Ashland. She immediately fell in love with it and went, "I'm ready to move back here. I want to open a photography studio," which she would end up doing 3 years later. And so after she had been in business for 10 years as the local photographer, I was lucky enough to become the local lawyer.
Oh, okay. Nice. And you stayed. What is it about this place that had you stay so long?
I think that there's a great community about Ashland. And Ashland still has some of those things that are vestiges of a different time. And I'm not just talking about like fancy houses on the railroad tracks. Not too many places is it like the attractive real estate to be on the railroad tracks. Right. But I love that we have a little pet store, and Mr. Mark runs the pet store, and my kids can go in and they can hold a bunny and they can look at a fish and look at a lizard and hold a bird. And I would support that guy every day of the week over, some big box store. And there are a great number of citizens in Ashland who feel that way, that, small business matters. Knowing the person that you do business with matters. Family matters. There's just a great sense of values, and it's a place that I'm grateful to be raising my children, and I'm grateful to live here. I'm grateful to do business here.
And you've lived all over, right? Your dad was a football coach.
That's correct.
And you've lived in a few places.
I have lived in 8 states: West Virginia, North Carolina, New York, Michigan, Oklahoma, Maryland, Florida, and Virginia.
Go ahead, Kevin. Ask your besides Virginia question.
That's 8. Oh, so what's your favorite one?
Beside-
Other than living in Virginia, the center of the universe. Favorite state to live in?
The only place that I lived in the longest, prior to living in Virginia, I lived in Oklahoma for 4 years. And if you're going to be a college football coach, especially in the South, you're either going to get a better job or you're going to get run out of town about every 3 or 4 years. And so a lot of my exposure to places are brief, but I've never lived in any place for 24 years,
What level football coach was your dad?
He was mostly Division I in the NFL. When we lived in Michigan, it was because he was the receivers coach with the Lions.
Oh, wow.
He was the head coach at Appalachian State, but usually was a coordinator or quarterbacks coach.
That's cool.
So Division I.
When we were talking about it before we recorded, I thought he was like a high school coach moving around the country, but he was big time.
He became a high school coach in the name of family stability. Right about when my older brother reached high school, we left Tulsa. We moved to Maryland because that's where he was raised. And my grandfather on that side of the family had just had this big heart surgery, and it was kind of like this moment of like, oh my God, you're gonna lose grandparents that you never got to know. So he moved to Maryland with the idea of we could live in one place and go to high school. And so for me, it was fantastic because he was hands down the best high school football coach in the state, and we won a championship every year. So it's like,
there is something to having a good coach.
I never lost in high school. It was definitely the exception.
Wow, that's crazy. You never lost a game in high school.
We had 2 undefeated seasons. And then my senior year, we went 6-4. Part of it was because we couldn't find anybody local to play us.
Wow.
And so we had to travel to Steubenville, Ohio. We traveled to Washington, D.C. to play DeMatha Catholic, who was just on another level, which I wouldn't realize until many years later when that kid, Brian Westbrook, that we played against would keep playing in the Super Bowl. And it was like, yeah, no wonder we never tackled that guy. He's really good. So...
Wow, and DeMatha is known for basketball, but I guess they have a pretty good football program as well.
An athlete factory.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're a lawyer and a businessman, right? You are running a business, essentially.
I would say that I'm a lawyer.
You're a lawyer. Well, as a lawyer or a businessman, what's your biggest challenge you've had to overcome since you started?
Running a business.
Tell us more.
I mean, they don't teach you any of that stuff in law school. They really don't teach you how to be a lawyer in law school. They teach you about the law. They teach you that the law developed, over these many centuries, and a lot of the law from Virginia came from England, and we're very different than what Louisiana does because their law came from France. But like when you get in, I was actually telling a joke with Judge Campbell about this a couple weeks ago. I remember being in front of him, and he just kind of reached down over the bench and chucked some paperwork at me. He was like, fill that out. And I was looking at it, and I had no idea what I was looking at, much less where I was supposed to sign what I didn't know I was looking at. And, the Hanover Bar Association has a lot of really great old lawyers, too, that'll kind of go, hey, kid, which we were grateful for, because everybody who's practiced law for a long time kind of has that story. But even less than learning how to be a lawyer, they don't really teach you anything about how to run a business. And so I've learned a lot about how to run a business from my wife, who is just absolute knockout at it, and kind of figuring stuff out along the way.
Yeah, you kind of have to, right?
Yeah.
You try something, it works, great, I'll keep doing it that way, and you try something and you fail, well, I have to avoid that the next time.
Right, but there's a time where you're kind of going through these growing pains. Like probably one of our biggest challenges is we grew so fast, and we didn't expect that. But when people say, well, why'd you choose Ashland? The real reason is because Trip Chalkley was elected the Commonwealth Attorney, and Frank Uvani was appointed to the bench, and Judge Campbell was appointed to the bench, and Willis Robertson had retired, and there were a couple other old guys that were looking at retiring, and so there was just nobody here. And so we were able to step in and fill this void. And we didn't expect the phone to ring as frequently as it did in the beginning. We were like, we'll just kind of get in here and maybe get to meet some people. But there was such a need that we grew, and it was like, are we ready to hire staff? I don't know. Can we afford staff? And then you realize once you hire staff that you can't afford not to have staff.
Right, yeah.
And then it becomes, we can't afford not to have 2 staff. But I would say up until this year, we didn't even market. We didn't even have to advertise because we had great word of mouth among the community. We had a 798 number, which is the unofficial way of telling people that you're actually local. And, the community was just great for us. But it helped that prior to being a lawyer, I was actually a high school teacher, and I did my student teaching at Patrick Henry 20 years ago. And when I got disenchanted by teaching, I sold real estate with Lou Flanagan over at Coldwell Banker, who also used to be a teacher. And he was like, come with me, young man, you can do this. And so when it came around to us opening the business, I actually knew a great many people, all of whom were happy to send business my way, but a lot of them want us to do real estate closings, and we're not doing that yet. So that's something I think that we're going to try to do with some strategic growth, move that direction.
Humor me for a second, and I read this. How was Clarence Thomas involved in you actually wanting to become an attorney, or was he?
So, my mother, everyone in my family for generations was either a coach or a teacher. And this goes back to the very first people from my family that got here in like the 19-teens and 1920s, who all settled in Columbus, Ohio. My great-aunt Teresa married a guy named Joe Marzetti. They opened up an Italian restaurant called Marzetti's. And so like T. Marzetti, the salad dressing in the mason jar, is my great-aunt.
Wow.
Right? So everybody on that side of the family would work at Marzetti's at the same time, and they would put themselves through school. And so my grandmother and my great-grandmother were both classmates at Ohio State together. They graduated together. They became teachers together, same year, even though they were a generation apart.
Wow.
And so my mother followed in those footsteps, as did I. That's initially what I went to Randolph-Macon for. And so by the time that my mother had become a principal, she was working at a school called Quince Orchard High School in Montgomery County, Maryland. And they had a great football team. And they had these 2 kids named Terrence Stevens and Jason Ankara. And they were both being recruited by the University of Nebraska. So they get on the plane and they fly out to Nebraska. And they have their trip, and they're coming back, and this older gentleman walks up to them and sees their Letterman's jacket and says, hey, excuse me here, are you Terrence and Jason? And they're shocked that this guy in Nebraska would know who they are. And he's flying on the same flight back to D.C. with them, so they strike up conversation, and they end up getting on the plane together, and they're sitting in coach, and the guy is sitting right in front of them. When the stewardess comes on to do the emergency announcements, somebody leans next to Terrence and goes, hey, man, you know that's Justice Clarence Thomas, right? And Justice Thomas was so, bummed that his anonymity had been blown, and it changed the tone of the conversation. And so that was kind of how the kids met him. And then my mother, when she was principal, she would always make the kids be in charge of their own graduation ceremony. And they came running in and they were like, Mrs. Working, we have the perfect graduation speaker, Clarence Thomas. And she was like, yeah, you graduate in June, and that's like the busiest time of year, so you should get a plan B. But they wrote the Supreme Court. Justice Thomas agreed to be the speaker. It was the first time he ever took a day off from the court while he was in town for the entirety of his tenure on the court. And he gave a wonderful speech. And then my brother and I went up there to meet with him because it was such a unique opportunity. My brother is an attorney in Memphis who is fantastic in what he does and has many published cases, and a case that's like been reported on Dateline about how great he was. Maybe it was 2020. It was one of those. But he handed Justice Thomas a copy of Justice Thomas's autobiography, and they were talking about a case, and Justice Thomas signed it, "Never stop helping others." And then he looked at me and he goes, "And what do you do?" And I had just quit teaching, and I was unemployed and flat broke. And I was so ashamed, that I stuttered and stammered, and I didn't have a good answer. And my whole family was like, dude, you need to stop, holding out. You'd be good at this job. You should go do it. And so when I first started law school, I did my first year at the Catholic University of America. And I had a constitutional law professor named Mark Rienzi who always, knows a lot of those justices. And he's brilliant. Unanimous opinion that he's brilliant. But he would work with Justice Scalia teaching the law to seminary students. And Justice Thomas was like, well, hey, man, how come he gets to talk to the students? Why don't I get to talk to the students? And Renzi was like, I'd be happy to bring my con law class. And so he did. And we go up and, we're all doing our handshakes under John Jay in the East Conference Room. And he's like, nice to meet you. I'm Justice. I said, well, Justice, this is actually the second time we've met. And I told him who I was. And he absolutely remembered every detail. And then he looked at me and he went, your mother never called me. I told her that I would mentor some of her students, and she never called. I'm like, oh, Justice, I'm so sorry. She probably just thought you were being polite. He goes, I gave her my word. You make sure she calls me. And so I had to go back and be like, Mom, the Supreme Court is kind of upset with you right now. But then he did, and he spent a couple years mentoring high school students. Oh, man. So he, regardless of whatever reputation he has for being a grump on the bench, he was absolutely wonderful conversationalist, very endearing, and really, really went out of his way to help a lot of kids in that area. It was really cool meeting him, and I've still got that picture of us in my office.
And what did he write in the book? Never Stop Helping Others?
He signed it, Never Stop Helping Others,
That's
which
awesome.
I think is a good mantra for somebody who's a lawyer.
And he's living it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a great story. You got to meet him twice.
I got to meet him twice, yeah. Actually, when I went back to school, I was in my 30s, and so they said, well, hey, we'll give you a scholarship if you write the best essay about why you decided to go back to school. And so I wrote that story about Justice Thomas, and then Catholic gave me $10,000, and that was awesome.
It's a great return.
They mailed my essay off to Justice Thomas, and he wrote a nice letter about it. So it was pretty cool.
That's very cool.
It was the short answer is, tell us about Justice Thomas and why you became a lawyer. It was like shame, and what do you do?
I'm unemployed.
Right.
And you're on the highest bench in the land.
Right.
That's good times. Is real estate work on the horizon for 2021, maybe next year?
I think we want to move that direction. My partner is really more interested in being, a corporate business attorney, transactional attorney, wills and estates. That's what she loves doing. I'm kind of the complete opposite, in that I love going to trial. And it's the closest that I can find of getting that, competitive rush like I would feel playing college football. And, I was in court this morning, and I thought I kind of had a stinker of a case, but it's the exact same feeling before the opening kickoff. You're like, so we just got to get this thing going and hit somebody, and then it'll all go away. And I'm a junkie for that, for going to trial, whether it's, criminal law, traffic law, family law, custody cases. That's what I love the most.
So for your firm, it sounds like you guys are 50-50 corporate versus going to court.
I would say we're really a general practice, and it kind of goes back to what we spoke about earlier with so many of the other attorneys had, retired or become judges or moved on to something else that, we didn't intend to be a general practice, but, people come in and say, hey, can you do this? Well, yeah, we can. We're smart enough to know that if we don't know how to do it, we know who does, and we say, well, you should go talk to, Chris.
Right. Yeah.
about that. But, between the two of us, we really cover the bases.
How much of your work is criminal when you go to court?
For me,
Yeah.
60%.
Really? It's that high?
66% maybe.
I thought you were going to say 20%.
No, man.
Do you have any fun stories that you can talk about on
Not
a
really,
recorded
no.
podcast?
I can't really talk about them until my clients, move on to the next realm.
Yeah, you want to keep your client base.
Right.
Yeah. All right, right
No,
on.
it's funny, and I say that. Like, one time we went to First Thursdays, and we were going to watch, Felix and the band and Ned Henson and all that, and I was sitting at the bar with a couple people, and then they walk up and were like, hey, man, this is my lawyer. And they were like, what are you talking about? He's my lawyer. And then like three people, I was like, what are you guys doing? We don't talk about this stuff.
A scene from a movie right there. That's great.
But my wife will have that all the time. Somebody will walk up and be like, oh, we're so grateful that John's helping us with this. And John hasn't told me about that. Really? No, he doesn't. He doesn't talk about, attorney-client privilege is pretty important.
It's supposed to be real, yeah.
What, in a town this size?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my God.
Everybody
man.
knows everybody, right?
Yeah, you can't talk about work,
Yeah, I wasn't trying to set a trap for you.
No, I know. This is, it is what it is. But some of them are maybe not podcast appropriate.
You're probably right. Sounds right. Maybe when you retire someday. Yeah. So it sounds like one of your favorite topics is football. Who's your favorite college team besides Randolph?
In my family, we always answer that question with it depends on who's coaching, because Dad still has friends that are out there and be like, oh, we're rooting for that guy, but no, he was a jerk to Dad. We're not rooting for him. So
it bounces around.
it does bounce around.
Okay.
But the sky is Tar Heel.
Oh, yeah. And all of my cousins went to Alabama. So
Did they play?
no, they were all women.
Oh.
But when my dad left West Virginia to go to he went to Wake. He went to West Virginia, then Wake Forest. And the young coach who moved into Dad's office was this new up and comer named Nick Saban.
Oh.
So we always cheer for the Tide.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I cheer for the Tide too, and I don't come by it honestly. I think they run a fantastic program, and yeah, they recruit better than everybody else because they're better at it than everybody else.
No kidding.
I think they have 50 recruiters on staff or something
nuts.
crazy.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. But I do not like the college football playoff.
It should be 16 teams.
I just like the bowls.
I like the bowls too.
I mean, when playing Division III football, where we do have a playoff, and there's going to be 4 teams left at the end: Wisconsin Whitewater, Mount Union, Mary Hardin Baylor, and somebody else. And everybody that played that level of football knew that was what's going to happen. Yeah. And now here we are a couple years later, and it's going to be Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, and somebody else. Yeah, Clemson.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, Oklahoma is in there a lot, and they haven't played in the championship game yet.
no, not yet.
It tends to be Alabama and Clemson.
They keep spitting out Heisman Trophy quarterbacks, though.
Right.
That's fair. That's fair. Do you have a favorite pro team?
The Ravens.
Okay.
wow.
All right, you come by that as a.
Yeah, my grandfather was actually drafted by the Colts way, way back when. He was the first All-American football player to go to Washington and Lee. So my dad was actually born in Lexington in Stonewall Jackson's living room because there were too many babies being born. They didn't have enough room in the hospital.
That's
So
crazy.
They made the Stonewall Jackson house a birthing hospital. And then Coach got drafted by the Colts. But the same year that they drafted my grandfather, they also drafted Bobby Lane,
Wow.
who would become a Hall of Famer for the Detroit Lions, and this other guy named Y.A. Tittle, who would be a Hall of Famer for the Giants. And Coach was like, I'm never going to play. I can never beat these guys out. Luck of the draw.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was a Colt. I mean, was he torn when they went to Indy? Because he played as a Baltimore Colt.
I asked him, and he said, that year that Peyton Manning won it, that he was rooting for the old blue.
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
Yeah. When we moved to Baltimore, all those guys were still around, though. And I played against Chad Unitas in sports. And when my grandfather was coaching at that high school in the 50s and 60s, the Colts didn't even have practice facilities. And so this was like, an 800-acre campus, all-boys military high school. And they would be like, hey, can you line off another field? And so they would, and it would be the high school on this field and the Baltimore Colts on the other field. And
wow.
There was like the 59 Colts, and Super Bowl champion Colts.
Yeah.
So like when I moved back, those were like regular living room guests. Jim Parker and
That's really
Raymond
cool.
Barry. Oh my God, it was awesome.
Do you ever want to? Do you have the urge to get back into football?
Sometimes, yeah, I do miss it. I miss, strangely enough, I miss practice.
I didn't play in college. I played through high school. I did not miss practice.
Like there's so much, but when you're a coach, like practice is really fun, and there's always something, ridiculous that's going to happen. There's going to be all these different personalities that you kind of need to blend and learn how to make into a unit. But the best jokes always happened in practice,
Right. You have a good joke that happened in practice?
No. Again, we've got to stay podcast appropriate.
That's why Hard Knocks is such a good show.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
That's
but
good
I still keep in touch with a lot of those kids I coached and a lot of the guys I coached with. And, it was fun. I mean, when I was coaching around here, I was coaching at Verona. And, I mean, we had one team where I think there were like 24 kids that went Division I. Yeah. That were on that, between the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And I mean, like Michigan, Florida State, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. It was just awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody can be a good coach coaching those kids.
Yeah, well, they've had kids go to the NFL. No
Verona
problem.
has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Robinson being maybe
Probably
the
the biggest name. Yeah.
Yeah. Good times. Do you have a fond memory from playing at Macon?
Beating Emory and Henry for our homecoming my freshman year was just the coolest thing ever. And it didn't happen because of me, very deliberately by a coaching move. But they were ranked number 1 in the country. And they came to our homecoming, and it was kind of like for all the marbles, ran off Macon versus Emory and Henry, as it was this past spring. And we had a freshman kicker named Kevin Churwa, who would go on to become like the all-time leading scorer, and I was the freshman deep snapper. And then we had a senior quarterback who was the conference player of the year. And the coach looked and was like, I can either put this in the hands of 2 freshmen, or we can just go for it on 4th down. And he went for it, and Sidney Chappell threw a touchdown pass to Sean Eaton in the quarter in the end zone. And we went up by 4 and ran out the clock. And everybody went nuts in Ashland that night.
Oh, I bet.
It was awesome.
Emory and Henry being number 1 in the country, most of their incoming male freshmen are football players.
Right.
Like 80% of them.
Yeah.
And they're going to Division II now. That's
Right.
how serious they are about their
Yeah,
program.
I've got one of my buddy's sons is going there next year, Bryson Lutz.
Okay.
So good luck to Bryson.
Yeah,
next
good
year.
luck to Bryson.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
And what's your fondest memory as a coach?
Oh man. So when I went to Lee Davis, we did not have 22 Division I football players on one team.
They still don't.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of kids who really, really would just try as hard as they could. And we had a coach named Zach Hayden who came in. It was his first time being a head coach, but he probably knows more about football than like everyone I've ever coached with. And we had a game. We were hosting Highland Springs, who's just better than us. They had better players, and we managed to hang tough. And we got towards the end of the game in the 4th quarter, and it was like 3rd and 10 or something like that. And they got a couple yards, but there was a penalty. And if we accepted the penalty, it was going to be 3rd and 11. And if we declined the penalty, it was going to be 4th down and 5.5. And, you know, as a coaching staff, we were like, dude, I don't think we can stop them twice.
Right.
We can stop them once. And we declined the penalty, and everybody thought we were stupid. Zach called a corner blitz off their sideline. The kid came clean as a whistle, Tyler Moody, and hit their quarterback in the back. Dropped him for a sack on 4th down. And we took over and ran out the clock. And I think that was the first time that Lee Davis had beaten Highland Springs in, like,
forever.
You know, more than a decade. And I don't know if that they've beat him since.
Probably not.
Probably not.
But
yeah.
that one was pretty fun.
What year was
it
that?
It
Do you
was 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the one where you can go. We blew a couple because of the coaching, but that one we won.
It's awesome when a severe underdog beats a team that's perennially just beating a world beater kind of thing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just to close, tell us a little bit more about your wife and 2 kids.
So my wife is better known as Jessica Robertson, and she has a photography studio at 307 England Street. We're 307B England Street, so Jessica and I share a building, which is awesome. And 2 little girls. One of them goes to Gandy, one of them goes to Henry Clay. And they are the queens of the center of the universe as far as I'm concerned. And everyone will bow down to their wrath, especially the younger one. But yeah, Jessica, I mean, as much as any reason is the reason why I'm living in Ashland and operating a business in Ashland. She had that vision in 2001. She executed it in about 2005. And she's, you know, been here where a lot of other photographers will kind of do like specialty shoots and things like that. She just takes pictures of people in Ashland, and then when she submits them for competition, they get put in an international loan collection, you know. And so she's, among photographers, kind of become this national brand of people want to do it how she does it. And that's why when I was talking about learning how to run a business from my wife, I would like to learn how to do it like she does.
Yeah, to be nationally known. Yeah,
even though it's a different type of practice. But yeah, when we go home, it's about 3.5 miles, and you know, school's halfway in between, and so kind of it's a tiny universe. You know, it's only.
Well, it is just the center.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, John, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.